From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about corvids, about crows. These amazing creatures have often been lauded more and more of late for their intelligence, which for a long time did not make sense because crows have a very, very small brain, but they do things that ordinarily we only think of other animals being capable of doing, namely mammals. So crows can teach their young and the other members of their murder across generations to remember the faces of those who have wronged them and the faces of those who have helped them. Yeah, it's crazy stuff.
And just to be clear, they aren't teaching murder. They teach the other crows around them at corvids.
Oh, wait, they do also teach murder, as we'll come to find.
No way.
Yes, wait, Ted. So what's happening here is that scientists may have finally figured out why crows, which have such a small brain comparatively, are so incredibly intelligent. We found out recently, through some research unveiled earlier this month in September, that crows are capable of metacognition. This is like a holy grail of philosophy. Metacognition is just the fancy word for being able to think about thinking. So when you are having your Rene Descartes moment and you say, I think, therefore I am, and you're thinking about your thinking, it turns out these birds can do that too. Why? How? They shouldn't be able to. At least that was our thought. Now we can explain it because it seems that based on two papers that were recently released, it seems that crows have a very high density of neurons in their very small brains. So it's like, imagine how something like popcorn or celery has maybe relatively low caloric content, and the same amount of peanut butter would have more caloric content. Mm-hmm. Their brains are peanut butter.
That sounds like an insult, but I know what you mean by that. Yeah, it's like the Noom app. I don't know if this isn't a sponsorship, but they help you lose weight by pushing the less calorically dense things. Like you can eat like your weight in lettuce, and it's like 2 calories. But if you eat just that tablespoon of peanut butter or mayo, it's like the equivalent of eating a whole bag of cabbage or something like that. Very interesting, Ben. So what does this mean for like the way they behave, or at least what scientists understand about the intention maybe behind the way they behave?
Yeah, great question. So they wanted to test whether crows can both be aware of and analyze the contents of their literal bird brains. A neurobiologist named Andreas Neider from the University of Tübingen in Germany trained 2 crows to peck at a red or a blue target on a panel, depending on whether they saw a faint light. And this neurobiologist kept varying the rules of the game. So the crows would be told which color meant what after the flash. Like they would see a flash, and sometimes they would have to peck the red target to acknowledge they had seen it, but then other times they have to peck the blue target. That's important because it means the crows have to take a second or two to figure out what they had seen earlier and then exhibit that behavior to the neurobiologist. And while they were doing this, they're tracking these crows' neurological activity, and they found that sensory neurons were active when a crow saw the flash. And these neurons indicated the crow's brain basically saying, yeah, I saw that. And if they did not see this flash, those sensory neurons were silent, and the crow would say, peck, no, I didn't see anything. And this means that the birds are aware of what they subjectively perceive, and they're correctly reporting what their neurons will tell them. That sounds a bit in the weeds, I get it. There's a little bit of jargon, but the main takeaway is this: they have behavioral flexibility. That's probably one of the best definitions of intelligence that our species has. We have mostly terrible definitions of intelligence. And this means crows are able to do something that only two other animals can do: human beings and macaw monkeys. I know that last one's kind of a plot twist, but so now it's the three of us. I'm mainly using this story, by the way. It is amazing science, but I'm mainly using this to tell you about the other interesting thing I learned, you guys, about crow intelligence. Crows are in an unending war with certain types of owls.
Okay, what?
Wait, does it go back generations to some, period where an owl wronged a crow and they've just generationally, carried on this beef of like a Hatfield and McCoy type situation? Or is it something biological? This is incredible.
It seems to be both. Genetically imprinted. You can take a crow raised in captivity and it'll have never encountered an owl and it'll just freak out, smash on sight. And owls are the same way, especially the great horned owl. Owls are like, okay, so I was thinking of a good analogy here. So picture crows and owls in their unending existential war. Crows are kind of like the humans, and owls are kind of like the vampires or the monsters that go bump in the night. Owls are unparalleled nocturnal predators in the world of crows. And owls are a lot like great horned owls, especially, are a lot like serial killers when it comes to crows. If they find a roost of crows, then they will kill them even if they don't need to eat anything. There's one great report from Cape and Islands that shows a great horned owl had basically done a breaking and entering operation on a roost of 9 crows, and their bodies were untouched except for their heads, which were partially removed, and their brains were eaten.
Oh my
and it
God.
left them.
That's
as a sign.
sick.
But when we think of this, we know that because of their intelligence, then crows are in some cases functioning like vampire hunters. They're saying, they have to attack en masse, right? They have to attack in numbers and do what's called mobbing the owl. So they'll assemble like a crew of corvids and say, we have to attack at dawn when the monster is vulnerable because it owns the night. And given their intergenerational learning, given their great intelligence, given their communicative ability, the coolest thing about this, at least to me, is this means that somewhere out there right now, there's like a crow version of Van Helsing, and it's hunting, it's hunting a great horned owl Dracula that is just out to kill crows.
Yeah, man. Okay, I would read that comic. One of the most interesting things here when you're talking about the corvid response to the owl threat is that mobbing behavior, I guess. They're on that same Cape and Islands article you were mentioning there, Ben. It's speaking about how this person who's writing it, the author, has seen a barn owl that got flushed out just from where it would normally be staying in daylight hours, and like a vampire, caught out in the daylight. Not like that, because he would just dissolve into ash. But some corvids saw it and they did the mobbing thing, and they ended up they essentially attacked it until it had to escape, and it jumped over a cliff, I guess, and went down into the water, into the ocean, rather than being able to fly or anything. It was really kind of sad for the owl.
Rather than be taken alive by the gang of corvids that were after him?
Well, I don't know. I guess, it was just an attempt to escape, I suppose. But
They drove it into the sea.
Yeah.
The last thing about crow intelligence and cooperation in the wild is, it goes even further than we think. We don't know the full extent. If you are a hunter, and crows are, as you guys said, familiar with you, you've been in these woods before, and you've left some kind of offering to them while you're hunting, they will help you find animals to hunt. Like they will fly up, and they're not trained to do this. They'll teach themselves to point out the deer or the elk or what have you to the hunter. And they do it because they know that when the hunter kills that animal, it'll leave something for them. It's very, very strange. Anyway, let us know your corvid adventures. Please do not wrong them. And please remember, they are wild animals. They're just very, very intelligent. We don't know how smart they are yet.
So I want to take it back to this study really quickly, Ben. I'm just having a little bit of trouble understanding it fully, and it has nothing to do with the way you explained it. I think it's just the way the articles refer to a lot of the things, because I know there's several things happening. The stimulus occurs to where the crows either see a faint light or not. Then the crow has to decide which of the two buttons it has to hit. What I don't understand is when the rules get changed by, the observers, the scientists, because it seems like the big thing here is that the rules get changed after the stimulus comes in. Then the crow has to decide which one to hit depending on that new rule. Is that correct?
Yeah, that seems to be about the size of it. The important thing there is that they're exhibiting the ability to adapt their behavior. So they're not learning a rote process. They're not learning something like always hit blue, always get treat. What they're learning is sometimes I have to switch the rules up to get the results I want because the communication of these weird human scientists is changing. Is it because they're dicks? I guess so, but they run the treats game, so I'll play ball.
And the big thing there is that they're like jumping thought essentially, rather than just A to B. Is that the idea?
They understand more about what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, they don't know. Maybe they don't know that there's a science experiment being run on them, but they understand that it's more than just like object, impermanence that children have. Where it's like they can actually think bigger. They can think about the framework of the scenario they find themselves in, and in essence, see the experiment for what it is, as opposed to just behaving like a less intelligent creature that would do, like you said, then red light equals treat, and then no light, no whatever.
The big takeaway is that before this month, that would have been considered physically impossible. Crows do not have the equipment that we have laid out in the same way. Crows do not have a cerebral cortex. They have something called a pallium, and that's kind of doing the heavy lifting that a cerebral cortex would do. So yet again, the big thing that makes this important for other studies of non-human intelligence and perhaps that of alien life in the future is that we're learning our brain's setup, our brain's loadout or whatever is probably just one of many, many options. We don't know what else is out there. But we do know the world luckily still has wild animals. And the problem is that due to COVID, in at least one case, we might have far fewer in the ocean very soon.